In this video, we are going to go over the answers for the photosynthesis and cellular respiration review sheet. So the first question is about photosynthesis, and it asks you to write the photosynthesis equation using words. So remember, the photosynthesis equation goes over how plants use energy from the sun and a few different molecules to build sugars. So the photosynthesis equation using words looks like this. We have carbon dioxide plus water, and that yields sugar or glucose and oxygen gas. And remember that in order for this reaction to happen, we must apply energy in the form of light, typically from the sun. Number 2 asks a similar question, but here you're going to write the equation in chemical symbols. So remember, chemical symbols are just those abbreviations that scientists use for different types of molecules. And when we write a chemical equation, it's helpful to have it balanced so that the number of atoms on the reactant side of the equation are equal to the number of atoms on the product side. And so when you write a chemical, you're going to have a number in front of that chemical occasionally. That number tells us how many of that molecule we're using. And within the chemical symbol itself, the subscript numbers tell us how many atoms of that particular element exist in that particular molecule. And so here again, we will have 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecules, and that yields 1 glucose molecule and 6 oxygen molecules, which escape the plant as a gas. Again, we also have light that is added to this equation. Often that's expressed by putting light over the yield arrow. Next, you're going to list the reactants of photosynthesis. So when you look at a chemical equation, anything that comes before the arrow is considered a reactant. Those are the things that you start with. And so in photosynthesis, the reactants are carbon dioxide and water. Number 4 says to list the products of photosynthesis. In a chemical equation, the products are what come after the arrow. So it's what is yielded or what we create when we do a chemical reaction. So the products of photosynthesis are glucose or sugar and oxygen gas. Now we're going to look at a diagram of a chloroplast, very similar to the diagram that was in the reading that you did earlier. And we're going to go through kind of what some of these different labels are. So letter A says or represents energy from what source. So when you look at letter A, you'll notice here that it is bright yellow. It's got that spiky margin that usually means energy is involved. So in this case, this is energy that comes from light. Letter B says, what is the name of the organelle indicated by letter J? So J's here, it's pointing to this entire organelle, which you would find inside of things like plant cells. Plant cells usually have many of these structures inside of them, and they are referred to as chloroplasts. Letter C says what reactant is indicated by letter B. So here we're looking for the molecule that is used during the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis. And in this case, we're looking for water. So we can write down H2O, since that is the molecule that we use as an electron donor during the light-dependent reactions. Next, we're going to look at letter D. It says what product is indicated by letter L. So this is the product of the Calvin cycle. So if you remember, this structure right here is the Calvin cycle. The input to the Calvin cycle is that letter C, that's carbon dioxide. The output of the Calvin cycle is sugars or glucose. Next, we're going to look at cellular respiration. So if you recall, cellular respiration is an opposite process to photosynthesis. Number 1 says write the cellular respiration equation using words. So the reactants for cellular respiration, which are the products from photosynthesis, are glucose and oxygen gas. And then when the reaction happens, it yields or produces carbon dioxide gas as a waste product, water as a waste product, and the goal of the reaction is to produce energy, which we store in a molecule called ATP. Number 2 says write the cellular respiration equation using chemical symbols. So much like we did before, we're going to write this as a balanced equation so that the atoms are equal before and after the yield arrow. And so this chemical symbol for glucose is C6H12O6, which means that the glucose molecule has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. That plus oxygen gas are the reactants, and then the products after the yield arrow are 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 water molecules, plus ATP. Number 3 says list the reactants of cellular respiration. So remember, this is what comes before the arrow. It's the 2 molecules that react with each other, and again, that's glucose and oxygen gas. And then the products of cellular respiration, which are the things that come after the arrow, are carbon dioxide and water and ATP, or energy. Number 5 says look at the diagram below to answer the following questions. So the diagram is similar to the one that you had in your reading, and it goes over the things that happen during glycolysis and then in the mitochondria with the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. So letter A says what molecule is represented by letter A. So when you look at the diagram, we're looking at this letter, and that molecule is glucose, and we know that because it's the first molecule that is broken down during glycolysis, which is this process. Glycolysis means sugar breaking, so it means that you're breaking down a glucose molecule. Letter B says what gas is represented by letter E, which is a product of cellular respiration. So letter E is here, and the gas that we produce as a waste product is carbon dioxide. So you can just write CO2. Letter C. It says what is the series of proteins indicated by letter G? So letter G is here, and it's pointing to the series of proteins that collect electrons, and because they collect electrons, it's called the electron transport chain. And then letter D says, what is the energetic molecule indicated by letter H called? So letter H is here. This is our energy molecule, and the energy molecule that is created during this whole process is ATP. Now we're going to look at a diagram that goes through how photosynthesis and cellular respiration are related. We're going to start with number 1, which just wants us to identify the organelle in plant cells that is responsible for photosynthesis. And so you can see that it is pictured here. It is this organelle that I've highlighted in green, and that is a chloroplast. So you can see plants have lots of chloroplasts inside of their cells, and each chloroplast is capable of photosynthesis. Number 2 would like us to identify the reactants, or the input molecules that enter the plant cell to carry out photosynthesis. And so the 2 different molecules that are used in this process are carbon dioxide and water. Remember, those are the reactants. Number 4 is looking for the name of the organelle in both plants and animal cells that are responsible for extracting energy from glucose. And remember, that cell organelle is called the mitochondria. Number 5 is asking the question, what gas is released as a waste product from plant cells during photosynthesis? And the gas that's released is oxygen gas. Number 6 is looking for the energy-rich molecule that is the product of photosynthesis. So remember, the energy-rich product that plants create is called glucose, which is a carbohydrate. Number 5 is looking for the gas that is an input or a reactant in the cellular respiration equation, and that is oxygen gas. And then the product that plant cells and animal cells are trying to produce during cellular respiration is the energy molecule ATP, and that's represented by the star. Star-shaped things are often used to represent energy in scientific illustrations. Number 2 on this page says, which gas is the building block of carbohydrates in photosynthesis and a waste product in cellular respiration? So remember that the carbon comes from carbon dioxide when you're building sugars. So carbon dioxide is the gas that is responsible for the construction of carbohydrates in plants. Number 3 says which molecule donates electrons that are energetic during photosynthesis and is a waste product of cellular respiration. And this is water. So remember that in photosynthesis, water is an electron donor, and in cellular respiration, water is an electron acceptor. Number 4 says complete the table to show how each molecule is involved in photosynthesis and cellular respiration. List the reactants, products, and explain how each process either captures or uses energy. You have the word bank, so hopefully you were able to use all of those terms. First, let's review what reactants are. A reactant is what you start with in a chemical reaction, and then a product is what you end with in a chemical reaction. So that's important to note as you're filling out this table. So let's go through photosynthesis first. Photosynthesis starts or has reactants that include carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthesis produces glucose and oxygen gas. And energy is captured during photosynthesis, so we would say that photosynthesis uses energy and stores it in glucose. For cellular respiration, the reactants are glucose and oxygen gas. The products of cellular respiration are carbon dioxide and water, and then it produces energy in the sense that it can store energy or capture it in the ATP molecule. So a major difference between these two reactions is that photosynthesis stores energy in glucose molecules and cellular respiration releases energy from glucose molecules. Number 5, explain how the equations for photosynthesis and cellular respiration are related. So essentially the two equations are opposite of one another. The products from photosynthesis are the reactants of cellular respiration. Meanwhile, the products of cellular respiration are the reactants for photosynthesis. This means that nutrients cycle between the two processes. And finally, number 6 is asking you to fill in the blanks to describe how photosynthesis and cellular respiration are related. So when you've completed this paragraph, it should say, autotrophs, such as plants and organisms that make their own food by carrying out a process called photosynthesis. In contrast, heterotrophs are organisms such as humans or zebras that must eat other organisms as food to obtain energy. During photosynthesis, energy from the sun is used to release energy from water. Next, carbon dioxide is used to build glucose. Cellular respiration is a process that is the opposite of photosynthesis. In this process, energy is released from glucose and captured in a molecule called ATP.